So let's continue building our practice app, which is a blog. It's already running on our local machine because we ran the command Rails server in the root directory. So we cd'd into blog, we ran Rails server. It's now running on localhost port 3000. We can actually check this out if we go into our browser and you type in localhost 3000. You get our application, which is live. Congratulations, this is step one. And you can get details about versions and things of that nature here, but it's not important. It's fairly basic at this point. Now let's begin building our application. Let's keep our application running, or at least the server running on one of the tabs in our terminal. Let's go to our next terminal. You want to again cd into the root directory. In our case, it's blog. And now let's work on creating some models. The models are the object of the applications where most of the business logic will happen, or the logic will happen. We will begin with models and then continue building from there. So let's run the command Rails generate model and then post. The name of the model is always singular and capital. So post, user, and comment will be the three models we'll work with just for practice. And we also want to add a few columns to the table. So we want title to be a string, and we want the body to be a text. And the reason they're different attributes is because titles are usually short, so we want them to be strings. The body of a text is quite long. It's usually a long description, so we want that to be text. Strings are, I think, limited to 250 characters or something close to that. So let's generate this model. This creates a few files for us, including the test files that we won't work on, obviously, during the practice round. And it will also give us the migration file, which we'll see, and the model, the post.rb model will be the models in the models file in our app file. So let's go into our editor and see what this looks like. If we go into our app model, and this is post.rb, this is our post class, or the model was created. It interacts with our database through active record base. And the reason this is useful is because most of this functionality is already built into, or is happening behind the scenes because of Rails. This is one of the reasons why it's so popular. If we go into DB or database, we can check out the migration file that was just created. So this is essentially the table with posts. It has titles and bodies with attributes string and text. We can go back and actually continue building more models. As you see here, we actually haven't changed or pushed this migration to the database. There is a special command for that. That's rake dbmigrate. There's also no schema.rb file here. The schema.rb file gives you a snapshot of the database at any given point. When we run that command, we'll see this in just a moment. But before that, let's go back into our terminal and run rake db migrate. This essentially pushes this migration into our database. It creates the table in the database. So let's go back into Sublime Text. You'll see here now schema.rb was created. You don't want to interact with schema.rb. This is something that the database is something we want to change through migrations. And let's also create another model. Let's go back and create, we created the post model. Now let's create the user model. So it's Rails generate user, and let's create this. So again, same thing happens, and we can actually create another one again. Instead of user or post, let's create one for comment. And again, the same thing happens. This time we want to rake db migrate to make sure all these tables are being pushed onto the database. Again, it's happened for both, for users and comments. And let's go back into Sublime Text, our editor. You see all these migration files. There's one for posts, one for users, one for comments. And the schema file has also been updated. So now we have three tables. We have a table for comments, for posts, and for users. This is essentially a snapshot of what we have right now. But to interact with our application, we need to create controllers. We don't have controllers yet. These are, with the exception of application controller, which comes straight with the application itself, we need to create the other controllers for posts, user, and comment to interact with them. So let's go into our terminal and let's clear this by holding Command and hitting K. Let's generate the command Rails generate, and this is Rails generate controller posts. And then notice this is plural, it's not singular like the model. And in our controller there will be different actions that will be defined. We can actually create some of them here right now. So let's say index, let's also create one for new, and let's create one for show and destroy. So it creates quite a bit for us here. As you can see here, it creates the controller in the app directory. It also creates these routes. These are the routes essentially that we'll be going to see these different attributes. So if we want to see a post, we go to post/show. If we want to create a new post, we go to post/new. If we want to see all the posts, we go to posts/index. And then these are all the style sheets or the views that have also been created. Because the controller was created, the views have also been created. The tests have also been created. Helpers we won't focus on at all. And these are the assets, or at least the style sheets that we can create for the views to make our app look better. So let's go into our Sublime Text Editor and see what has just been created. If we go into our controllers now, we see that there's a post controller that was just created, that we created with the different actions of index, of new, of show, of destroy. Let's go into our routes in the config directory. Let's close this out to reduce confusion. So it's routes.rb, and you see here that these different routes were just created right now because of those methods as well. So if we go, let's say post/index, copy this, and let's go into our browser, and at the end here, let's so it's localhost 3000 and run that. We'll see that there's a view file for post index, and this is where the index, or at least all the posts, will be. You'll see in on one page, and we can do the same for all the other ones, but this just goes to show how our application works. So we've created the controller for posts. Let's do the same for users and comment as well, just to see what it will make our application look like. So let's run the command again. This time it will be for users. Again, it's plural, not singular. We also create the methods here for index, new, show, and destroy. There are a few other more that we can create. There can be one for update, for edit, for create as well. But this is just an example that shows what's possible. So we created one for users. We created one for posts. The last one is comments. So let's do the same thing here. Again, this controller has also been created with all the same features. So let's go into Sublime Text. Now these are all the routes that have been created for us when we created the controller. This is what's so beautiful about it. You run one command and there's a lot that happens behind the scene that makes your life extremely easy. And what we can do now is go back into our controllers folder and see that users, posts, and comments have been created. A very important distinction here is that our controller, our comments controller, inherits from our application controller. The same for posts, the same for users. So it's application controller here that essentially our controllers are inheriting from. Now in models, our comments, our posts, and our users are inheriting from active record. Controllers will inherit from application controller. So comments inherits from application controller, which is this application controller, and application controller then inherits from action controller. So it's not direct. It's not comments directly inheriting from action controller. They inherit from application controller, and then application controller inherits from action controller. And I'll show you that visually. So let's go into see what this looks like. For models, our user model and our post model inherit from active record base directly. For controllers, it's user controller and our post controller inherit from application controller, and then that inherits from action controller base. So this is a slightly different, slightly interesting distinction to make here. I also want to note that our models, say the user model, it has a database that corresponds to it, and it's always singular and lowercase. I'm sorry, the database is plural and lowercase. The model is singular and capital. These are the data types. If you remember when we typed in our different, like for title it was string, and for body it was text. These are the different data types or the columns of our table that are possible. So if you're trying to create, say, a Pinterest application that relies on images, you would use a binary there in that example. Another interesting thing here is the relationship between the models. So now we have a post model, we have a user model, we have comment model. Post has many users, or belongs to a user, I should say. One post belongs to a user. A post cannot exist without a user. But a user has many comments, and a post actually also has many comments. There could be another line here as well. The last big idea I want to introduce here is the router. The router is essentially how our application receives incoming requests and deals with them, how it renders views and works with the controller in our application. This is a quick table that summarizes what happens. There are the GET requests, these are HTTP requests. There's the GET request, the POST request, the patch or the put request, and delete. So the GET request is essentially you're requesting information from the application. So it shows you the posts or anything that's worth showing in the application. POST is how you create something. You send something to the application. The patch or put is how you update anything in the application. So if you wanted to update a post, it would be a patch or put request. And lastly, obviously, delete to destroy anything that you're working with. So it can be a post in our case. And there's the path, which I'll explain where I got the path, the controller, and what exactly these do. So if we go into our terminal and you type in rake routes, this will give you all the routes that have been created in our application. We've worked on the comments controller, users controller, post controller, and they've created all these routes for us. They all correspond to a view, and so it's the controller, the comments controller, the index action in that controller. So let's go back into Sublime Text to show you exactly what's happening. These are the routes, so let's go. Our first one was comments/index. If we go into the browser, we can see that comments/index renders this view for us. So where did this view come from? This view came from us creating the controller for our applications, or I should say the comments controller, the first one, the index action. There is a corresponding view for that. So if we go into our comments view folder, there is index.html.erb. This is what was rendered here. This is what we see here. So obviously we'll be working with these different parts as we build our applications and build different functionalities for them as well. We'll be working with the controllers, the models, the views, the routers, and we'll be manipulating them to build different functionalities for our very cool applications.